So basically, my presentation, and this is not going to work because I'm one of these guys that basically, I got to talk my hands, I got to walk around, so I'll warn you, this may be a little interesting. All right, so trials and tribulations training during the pandemic. Obviously, I've been training for many years, and in-person training before the pandemic was pretty straight, pretty simple, pretty easy to do. All right, so I actually would like to start off by getting some information. So, just like that, we're all on the same page of what an asbestos project is. This is what an asbestos project is, right? It starts at the survey. All right, so those of you who are inspectors, you're the first ones, you're the first line of defense. And whether you do an inspection and it's negative, it still was an inspection for asbestos, so it's part of the asbestos project. So when you're going to answer this first question, I'm going to ask you, realize inspectors, designers, planners, if you do that type of work, you're part of the asbestos project. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to do this. The easiest way to do this, and I'm going to have a couple of these, so this isn't the first one. The easiest way to do this is if you have a device, a phone that basically has Safari or Internet Explorer or whatever, Google, you can basically go to the internet and go to polev.com/Angelo Garcia 868. When you get there, this question will be there, and all you have to do is pick a letter. The other way you can do this is you can do text messaging. All right, so if you know how to open up a new message, you basically open up a new message. This is the square with the pen. You click on that. The first thing it's going to ask you is for the phone number. The phone number you're going to send a message to is 22333, 2 2s and 3 3s. All right. Then the message you're going to send is my name, Angelo Garcia 868. No spaces. Doesn't matter, capital, lowercase, whatever you want to do. Angelo Garcia 868, but no spaces. You should get, if you're doing the text messaging, you should get a message back from us saying you've joined Angelo Garcia, the third poll. If it says Angelo Ramirez, you put a space in, or you spelled my name wrong. You'll have to get out of that poll and get back in using the correct way of doing this.
So I want to point out that the cards that are on your table are for the other presentation. So if you scan that card on the table, that's not what Angelo is talking about right now. It's a different system.
Unfortunately, I needed to do this with my system because of this fact that my training, when I'm going to use your information, is to compare your information to the information I gathered from my students, because this is what I use to basically create interaction in my classes. So basically, that's the reason why I need this information. So you gotta have, you'll see a difference in the how that works. Hopefully. Yeah. Thank you. I see you've gotten 14 results. That's great. Thank you. I do appreciate that. 15, 16, we're still moving up. So I'll give you a couple more minutes. So while you're doing that, one of the things that I'll go ahead to is basically discuss with us some warnings about this presentation. All right? The first thing is, it's not a political presentation. All right? This is not about politics. It's not about freedoms, any of that kind of stuff. It's a business decision. It was the business decision that I made to basically continue to be able to provide services for my clients, provide the training that they need, because let's be serious, though your card didn't expire, your training, nothing basically changed the training requirements that you had to basically go for training every year. So nothing changed on that side. And you're going to see there's a big difference in the number of certificates that we issue year to year, which will kind of interesting is find out how many of those were certificates that people didn't realize that after 2 years you would have to take the whole course over again. If you went by your card, you would actually be expired and actually have to take whatever course was expired, you'd have to take the whole courses over again. Right? So, decisions decision might be the decisions were purely based on, what do you call it? Not politics, but business decisions. Right? And I think we'll keep moving here. So interesting. All right, so we got around 25, 26 people, and this is the breakdown. All right, so about 60% don't do asbestos. All right, 8% do a few jobs, and then we got big numbers down at the bottom. All right, so pretty interesting there. All right, so let's keep going. So you understand the difference. This is what a boat project is. Those are the two big trainings I do. I do asbestos and mold training. And so this is what a mold project is, the definition. And so the question for you is, how many of these do you do in a year? Right, so now you don't have to do anything. If you're using the internet, you just refresh the screen, and this question will come up. And if you're using a text messenger, you're all set up. Just pick a letter and send it. Continue on with the warnings here. Our main concern was safety and health of our customers who attended our in-person courses. Our decision had to include a balance between people who agreed or disagreed on the right way to be protected, and since both courses could be basically people who could be in the classes. So both people who had different decisions would be in the same class, so we had to basically decide how we were going to do it for everybody. And number one assumption was that the trainer could be the source. Right? The trainer could be not affected and basically not even know he is the source. So that was the biggest thing that we basically made the assumption on. All right, so basically next. Okay, so this one's a little interesting. Right? We don't have too many mold people here. The kind of interesting presentation this afternoon is going to be disappointing for some people. Believe me, it won't be disappointing for me. So this is what I was just reading from. All right. And this last thing, I don't know if you guys remember, I grew up with this TV show, Dragnet, and it always started with, ladies and gentlemen, you're about to hear are true, only the names have been changed to protect the innocent and the not so innocent. So we're going to cover four sections: the history, virtual training, back to normal, and basically cause and effect. So the history, pretty straightforward. You guys all lived this, so you understand. 2019. In China, 25th, 2020, got to the U.S. in January, right? Just between PACNY, right? It's kind of funny, right? 2020, we had the PACNY conference at the end of February, and then on March 1st, we got on first detected New York State corona case. Right? March 11th, they decided it was a pandemic. New York State, basically, Department of Health shut down training providers. New York State Department of Labor temporarily extends family certificates. Right? 2020, DOH allows training providers to submit a teleconferencing plan. We are approved in May of 13, our first class May 18, and June 3rd, New York State DOH allows asbestos training providers to offer in-person initial asbestos training, and refreshers must remain online, remote, until the rest of the education is open in phase 4. Valley region aims this phase 4 and future environment, giving permission to start offering in-person asbestos and mold refresher courses. June 19th, pandemic policy modified to include vaccination. And DOL requires current asbestos hard cards by July 31st, 2021. This is what we had to meet in the sense of the virtual training requirements. I'm not going to bore you with the details of this, but we had to meet all of these requirements in our teleconferencing plan. Some of you have taken virtual classes, you know what we're talking about here. Some, you may not understand how we got to get to these things, but this is basically what you had to do. The biggest issues was the DOH certificates. How are you going to issue them? Remember, they have to have original signatures of the student, and you're not supposed to go visiting the student. One of the things that was very interesting is because a lot of students on Long Island live close to each other. I had students who wanted to come into the class, come to the office, and basically sign the forms. And really, we're not supposed to do that because they're not supposed to be separate. Then not only were the virtual requirements, then there were general requirements. And the general requirements not only were about what you had to do, but some of the things with the student information memo, if you didn't realize, that is the official signature for the class. So that form we had to get, because that form is the official signature for the entire class, for the roster, for everything. Right? Student must sign into the teleconferencing plan for individually, right? So people can't share a video conference. So each person had to have their separate video conference. Right? You can imagine what you had guys calling me up and say, hey, listen, can we sit in an auditorium, just have one? No, you gotta have, each person has to have their own video. Right? So we had stuff like that. Student instructor must have video capabilities. The entire training session must be recorded. This was the fun part. It was tempting, believe me, it was tempting to record and bring some of the recordings. This way you could hear some of the things that were said on recordings. But I didn't think that would be completely fair because I didn't know how to block out their name or any of that stuff and try to make it protect their innocence. But it's, if a person started to talk and then, you can imagine, you get carried away and the next thing you know, you got F this, F that, and you're like sitting there going, remember you're being recorded and they're going, they just froze at that point. So those are the kind of things you could just picture what else is talked about, what is talked about in class. You sit there and go, is that really appropriate? And then, now you're recording it. I cannot arrive late into an online session. What a nightmare that is. Cannot arrive late and there's no makeup for life. All right, we'll talk about what some of the trials, tribulations are. All right, distractions. Okay, how do you prevent distractions? Right? You don't control the person, you don't control their house. All of a sudden, next thing you know, you got a cat walking across the TV monitor. You're supposed to kick that person out. I don't know about you, but I didn't. Instruction must include interactive, participatory training. If you know any of these things, the Zoom and stuff, one person dominates the conversation. And if you got two people want to talk at the same time, it's every other word. All right? That's a difficult. And then once we got to the in-person thing, how do we have to handle that? We basically put together a pandemic policy. These are just the major points. I'm not going to get into it because I'm sure everybody had something similar. All right? What we did was, I saw CDC had a website that basically you could enter in your information in the sense of symptoms, and it would tell you whether you should basically be able to go out or not. So we just said, go to that site before you come to class. If you have symptoms, go to the site, enter those symptoms in. If the thing says you can come to class, you can come to class. All right? And then when we got there, we did what every construction site is doing. We measured their temperature and basically asked them, did you have any of these symptoms and stuff like that. All right? All right, once vaccination happened, we decided we were going to ask for vaccination. All right, we just felt that basically this way we can ask for it, and if you don't want to provide it to us, what you feel invading your privacy, then you have to wear a face covering. Very straightforward. All right? Or you can take an online training course. You don't have to come to class. You can basically take it online. We're still doing online, and we're still in person. So you can do whatever you want. All right? If you show me a vaccination card, I'm not going to make you wear a mask. Okay, and we provided masks that stayed intact. As an instructor, I'm vaccinated, fully vaccinated. I always stand 6 feet away from everybody, and I wear a mask the whole time during the class. All right? That's because I may be the source. All right, so how do we meet the requirements? I have to thank a very dear friend of mine, Michelangelo. He's a cybersecurity expert, and he went through with me. I told him I was going to use Zoom, and he told me, no, you're not. And you have to remember, when Zoom first came out, there was a whole bunch of issues about security that Zoom had. All right? Zoom did a good job of basically fixing all of that, but most of the cybersecurity experts were saying, don't use Zoom. So I was like, what else am I supposed to use? I don't know anything about this stuff. This is not anything, I'm not a technical guru here. So he went through with me and used every single communication program. And the only communication program that I felt was easy enough to use was GoToMeeting. All right. So I used that, that's the program we use. And at the beginning it was a little tough. Now I am so happy I use GoToMeeting. It is much better than Zoom. Poll Everywhere, student interaction. So that's how we basically resolve the interaction problem. We use Poll Everywhere. Administrate, I host the exam. Right, so we're able to get the exam, and actually we got comments that the exam was easier online than it was in person. It's the same exam. Nothing changed on the exam. Actually, in some ways, it changed because the system changes the answers. Right? So the answer is not always A, B, C, D. Right? So what was D in one exam is actually A in another exam. So things like that changed. So the exam actually wasn't the same every time that the student took it, but what happens is it graded the exam as they took it. All right? So basically they answer the question, and the question is answered, and if it's right, they keep moving, and if it's wrong, it says, it's wrong. Do you want to change your answer? Guess what? No failures the entire time I used GoToMeeting. We used Administrator. Right? In person, usually get 1 or 2. Nothing during this whole time. And then CourseJack to do the course evaluations. I had to basically evaluate the course and how we did it. So, after all this planning, we put it into things, so what's the trials and tribulations of virtual? The first thing is, our major client's firewall blocks video access to GoToMeeting. And basically proceeds to blame future environment designs. It's all your fault. It's not the software, it's GoToMeeting. And other people have been using this for years. One of the things that's advantage of GoToMeeting is GoToMeeting has been around for a long, long time versus Zoom. And again, I'm not trying to belittle Zoom. I know most of you guys have used it. You guys love it, but I'm telling you right now, security-wise, this is the best option and ease of use for an instructor to use. An instructor who's never used technology like this is a piece of cake. It took 3 months to resolve this thing and found out it was the firewall of my client that was blocking the access. And they basically had to go to meeting, and my client had to negotiate basically opening up the port that they needed to basically open the video. So that was a lot of fun. Right? So, okay, students arriving on time. Right on time, 8:30, the class starts there, 8:30, and I can't get the camera on. What do you mean you can't get the camera on? The camera's on. No, it's not. Get the camera on. Now, you can imagine if you get a couple of those right at 8:30 and you're trying to work this out, and I don't know about you guys, but after a while, it doesn't come on, you have a problem. I think we need to go to the next class. All right? And obviously, half an hour, but dealing with that, that's when we finally said, okay, that's enough. Students not providing necessary paperwork. Come to the class, I haven't gotten the paperwork yet. In some senses, the way the rules are, I'm supposed to kick him out because I don't have an official signature for him. And obviously nobody wants to do that, none of us do. So we let him go, and eventually I get the paperwork, or I get it that same day, I get it in an email, he says I sent it, I go look, and sure enough, he sends it. So I've had that problem that basically I had to worry about that I have a guy in the class and I have to send my paperwork up to the state and I don't have that form. I got lucky with that. This was the amazing part. How much paperwork did you have to fill out? Right? All the paperwork you fill out in the class, I now have to fill out. Right? So if you think about all the paperwork you have to fill out in class, imagine I have to do it for every student that's in my class. That's how much extra paperwork we're talking about. And now, how do I get you your DOH form that you have to sign before you can actually send it up there? Right? So the extra cost involved with shipping your paperwork and shipping your paperwork to make sure you got it. Right? You can't just put it in regular mail. Could, but then now you're at the whims of the regular mail, so we use priority mail. And obviously helping students who basically aren't technology based. Right? So I actually joke about the slide that I basically had before this. You see that cartoon? Now that cartoon is because the guy is looking over his shoulder, right? Now imagine doing that with a video. No, move the mouse here. No, that's a tab. You need a tab. You gotta go to the tab and basically take the exam. No, the picture I'm showing you on the screen is not the exam. I'm just trying to show you where the exam is. Okay. Now, you can't take the exam on the screen. So you get the idea. Try doing that. Looking over the shoulder is easy. Move the mouse there, do this. Try to do that over a video screen with somebody who doesn't even know what a tab is. Alright, so. This is my favorite one. This is the third class. We just started virtual classes. All right. So you think everybody, just started virtual classes. Remember, we were never allowed to do virtual classes. The pandemic all of a sudden allowed us to do virtual classes. And one of the things we're warned about is students cannot arrive late to class. All right. If students arrive late in class, they must be locked out of class. So 8:30, the lock on the door goes on. 8:45, I get a phone call from one of the students who's supposed to be in the class saying, I can't get into class. And guess what? I'm busy teaching a class. I can't answer that phone call. 8:55, another phone call. Can't get into class. Well, guess what? Gotta go to the next class. So the guy who did this to me, actually stopped coming to training. They took him and his company and went home. Took his ball on his back and said, I don't want to play anymore. Students losing power in the end of class with no makeups. One of the advantages of doing these classes was that I didn't have to be in Syosset. So basically, I went to see my daughter in August, and she lives in Florida. I did the class from Florida. And my daughter, the class in Long Island was basically in the middle of a hurricane. 2 students, an hour and a half before class ended, lost power. And hence dropped out of class. And no makeups. So what do I do? Well, guess what? I got lucky. I was being audited. And the auditor was from Albany, and she basically said, listen, I'm going to talk to the bosses to see if we can basically have those people make up the class. And sure enough, I got word they could. And as long as they could do it within 2 weeks of the class, which obviously these 2 people were like, yes, when do you want us there? Anytime, just tell us what it is. Right? So you get it. So it's very interesting. We were lucky that way. I train class while I'm ensuring students are not distracted. I kind of already talked about that when all of a sudden the dog comes across, the cat comes across, dogs barking. You got that. Or my favorite one, the kids come on, right? The kids are right there on the screen. They're all saying, hey, look at the guy on the screen. Students having distraction. This is my favorite one. A guy basically has got his phone. I see him, he's walking along. I see he goes into his car, puts the the phone on his car, and now he's driving. And I go to the guy, you realize that's distracted driving. And I am not going to be responsible for this. Goodbye. Click. And shut him off. Take him out of class. I didn't have a choice. I didn't feel I had a choice. Distracted driving. He gets into an accident. How do I know they ain't going to come back to me? That's scary. Successes. I pull everywhere. Worked very well, provided interesting information about my clients, which you're going to see. Use administrator to administer the exam with the program. They also gave me abilities to do other things. Use Chek to do course evaluation. Allowed us to use the evaluations online. So if you've seen my posts, and my posts lately have said, you can go to Chek.com to see what our average rating is. That's what it allowed us to do. And even go to meeting was basically, once the bugs were worked out, it was fantastic. Everybody basically loves it. So, this is you guys. You said, how many asbestos projects have you done in the last year? These are my students. This was funny. The reason why it was funny is because I pride myself on being a world-class trainer, training at high, advanced levels. But 51% of my students don't do asbestos. So you guys are not laughing at that, but believe me, when I first saw this come in, I was cracking up. I was just sitting there going, here you go. Here's the boot in the pants. So. Hey, listen, I didn't say I was a researcher. Alright, so how many more projects have you done in the last year? So this is PACNY. And this is my students. So my students actually, some of my students do more mold than you guys do. So now we go back to normal. What does that mean? Larger classrooms, right? Spread out, 6-foot distancing, that kind of stuff, right? Got the social distancing, hand sanitizer readily available, instructors keep their distance, and eventually vaccination. So, trials, tribulations here. One client maxed out at 9, said you can't do a class more than 9 people in a room like this. Right? Second client said, same room like this, 9 plus the instructor. Right? Instructor training with face covering. So, I figured, let you experience this. So this is how the training went. Now, realize I'm using a microphone right now, so you're getting it a little bit better than you would get in a class where I'm not using the microphone. Alright? So this is how I train it. And for those of you who read lips, good luck. Okay? Students trying to understand the instructor. Right? With face covering on. Right? And students wear face covering and then not wearing them properly. And you guys probably have seen this all along, people wearing it below their nose, their mouth. I'm sure all of you have experienced this. I'm not going to bore you to tears with all the different types of ways they wear it, including one person coming in covering his eyes. I don't even know I got into the classroom. I promoted, so the success with the pandemic policy is we promoted it. Right? We wrote about the policy on our blog, newsletter, social media. Up front, all students received the policy when they registered and then received it again when they reminded. Right? Choices on the policy was not limited to a position. In addition, we offered both in-person and online courses. As I told you, once we had vaccination, we just basically said, are you vaccinated? And basically, if you're not vaccinated, you gotta wear a face covering. If you don't want to tell me you're vaccinated, you have to wear a face covering. If you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a face covering. Basically. So nobody learned from this? Know my students better. 50% don't do asbestos. So most of them love my stories, but a lot of them just want the basic information. Students from the same company clubbed together. This was funny, and actually this picture shows you really can't see this. You have one company over here, one company at the other end, and there's another company at this side. And they all stuck together. So it's just hilarious seeing that when groups came from companies that they would just stick together and basically try to stay 6 feet away from other people. So that was funny. And then the vaccination thing, what was unexpected is I expected people to be upset with me and say, I don't want to show you the vaccination card. I'm going to wear a face cover. It was the other way around. I didn't even have to ask for the vaccination card. They came and showed it to me. I got a vaccination card. I don't have to wear a mask. Like, cool, okay, great. I didn't even have to ask for it. They just volunteered the information. So that was one of the things that was unexpected. I expected to have to say something. I was expecting some people to give me a hard time, but I felt I gave them the information ahead of time so they could make the decisions on whether to take an online course or whatever. So what did we learn regarding asbestos? Right, so question for you guys, right? And actually this question was from PACNY, because I remember at the PACNY conference, a guy coming up to the microphone spoke about lab 55 and 198.8 and saying, why are we doing these methods? So, I have a question for you. When you've used either of these methods, and these methods for plaster and lath, right? So if you have an answer for this, when did it come back positive? How often do you see it come back positive for asbestos? Using lab 55 or 198.8. Right? I realize never is never. 25% I've had people say, so I've seen 10%. All right, so 1 to 25%, 26 to 50%, do you get this? So if you're in that range, that's the range that you should be doing. And if you see it every time, every time. So I think this will be interesting to see, because this was, like I said, a question that was asked here. And you know, a few people said, I remember sitting next to MSL asking them the same question, and MSL saying to me, I don't have that answer. I was like, oh, okay, great. You guys do this testimony. They probably have that answer now. I'll give you a couple more minutes. This is my students. What I think this shows is that there is a reason to do this method. That's plaster and lath, okay? So the next question is, how about fireproofing? Because in some senses, that's what this method started off as, it's just fireproofing. Interesting piece of information that I got from my students that kind of asked this question. Like I said, it was a PACNY guy who came up and asked that question. I think they actually asked it of the panel, the Department of Labor panel, of saying why are we using this method, not realizing it's the Department of Health that decides which method that we use. It's interesting that basically we're getting the answers we get. Right? And look at that one. Obviously, my joke is that we're proving that there's a reason for this method. It obviously doesn't ask the question, do we really need this method, or could we have just done this the same way with the other method? It doesn't ask that doesn't answer that question. And this is my students. This is what we learned regarding these questions. My students. Okay. All right, so other things we learned. What did we learn about mold? Biocide use. This is biocide use. My students. You can see a lot of them, 14% 26% don't use it unless it basically specifies specific remediation plan, which is what's required. Right? How about my antimicrobial coatings? How frequently is that being used? And you go the numbers here, a little less frequently. Right? Then, how about air sampling? Right? I know you had a remote panel this afternoon, so here's some of the interesting dynamics of my students, right? And the different types of sampling that they do. All right, so you understand the next question, what do we mean by, what do you call it, problematic fungal types? All right, so this is the list AIHA put together. I added Fusarium to the list. And in other words, the question is, if you have this in a sample, does it pass or does it fail? All right, so that's the question. How many spores of the previous are you allowing on a sample? 41% is none, 24% don't interpret the data, which I like to joke as punting. Right? Consult the laboratory and make a decision together. Then you got 22% that are doing one or two. Right? Just to let you know, the guides don't say, the guides basically say none. Okay? So ask the question here. This is a little more complicated question, and considering a bunch of you guys don't do mold, it may not make a lot of sense. But how are you doing clearance? Right? And this is what the panel this afternoon is going to be discussing. So if you do sampling, the question is, are you comparing outside versus inside? If it's low outside and it's high inside, it means it fails. Are you using outsides and a background sample versus insides? Low outside, low background, high inside, it fails. Outside and a non-complaint area versus inside, low outside, low non-complaint area, high inside, it fails. Outside versus inside based on an order of magnitude, right? Low outside, high inside based on an order of magnitude, for example, 10 times of outside, and it fails. And the last is I don't interpret the results, the laboratory does. I know it's a little complicated question. We'll give you a couple of minutes for that, but otherwise we'll move on quickly because it's based on the previous question that you guys don't do a lot of mold. I'm wondering how many people can I actually answer this question. Looks like 8 people. 9. And we'll move on. So that's what you guys got. And this is what my students do. I keep pointing at the screen, it should be pointing at that. It's working, so it doesn't matter. Right. So you understand, these are my students, right? I teach letter D. So you can see only 13% of the students I teach actually use the method I teach them about. Cause and effects. Right? We're back to normal. Right? In 2020, we lost 36% of our students to attrition. Right? In 2021, we gained back half. Revenues, we lost 25% of our gross revenue. Right? In 2021, we're a little off our 2019 revenues, so we're almost all the way back. Revenue-wise. How did I do that with half the students and cutting prices? Because they learned later on that basically we lost people because of retirement. My clients lost most of their students because of retirement. The way I did that is because now all of a sudden in 2021, we had a bunch of initial classes, right? And that continues on currently. I have had 4 or 5 initial classes that have been basically, I expect to be back full to the full student ratios at the end of this year. So we got lucky that basically we got the initial courses. come back and, they're replacing the people that. So, I'm sorry. I was afraid I was going to do this. So, if you didn't read this paragraph right here, for the next the industry back to normal, I want to thank Karen Cummings. All right, she's the program director for the Department of Health. She gave me the information about the certificates that we issued every year, right, for the last 4 years. All right, so how many certificates, how many events were done for each of the titles. All right, and I want to thank Chek Beng Ng, who also does it for MOLT. Right? It's funny because Karen is the program director, so I was going straight to the boss. But since Chek does the mode, Chek is the boss for mode, but he's not the boss, right? Smith is his boss, and Amy Phillips is his boss. So in a sense, I was going to one of the workers that kept reminding me that basically, remember, I'm just one of the workers. Those are the bosses. They're the ones that have to give the permission. So it was a little funny that way. So, thank you both, Karen and Chek. I don't know if you guys are here. Chek wanted to come. I'm not sure if he made it. I'm not sure if Karen. Did you get in touch with Karen? She's not coming. So, sorry about that. I forgot to do that. So this is the information that came from Karen. This is a certificate. It's based on title. Right? So we start with the handlers down here, and if you notice the numbers, they're going down. They're smaller and smaller. Every year they're smaller and smaller. And that goes for almost every single title. Right? It started around 9234, and by 2021 is 7516. So it's 2,000 people lost. And if you look at the 2020 number, there's a big drop in the number of students. If you just look at the handlers, and of course, supervisors is all the way at the top. If I remember, oh no, excuse me, project monitors at the top. I know it's a tough graph, but with this many titles, it's tough to basically create a graph that you can see all the different numbers. So what are we seeing? Refreshers versus initials versus total certificates. Right? All going down. Year. Big drop in 2020. What's amazing about this is that you'd think you would see the initials, right? The first one is initials, so 5,357 initials, 20,950, so you're at a total of 26,000. Next year you should see 26,000. But you don't. You only see 20,000 refreshers. Right? So it's interesting, we're training a bunch of people who then don't come back, or either that, or we're losing a bunch of people who are leaving the industry. Right? Significant numbers. However, the courses are staying the same. Right? So the number of courses that are being held are almost exactly the same. A little bit down, but not by much. Not as steep as you see from the workers leaving. Right? And this is a kind of a guide on the attrition. Basically, the number of people from each of the titles and where you're losing them. Right? From each of the titles you see on the side. For the last 2 years, we've been losing it. The last year, we gained some back. We're not gaining back as many as we've lost. And even 2 of the titles there, we still lost people in 2021. Attendees per event for initial courses. Right, in 2018, there was 6.83 certificates issued per event. In 2019, it was 6.93. And then in 2020, it dropped to 6.49. And in 2021, 6.02 certificates issued per event. Significant drop in the number of students per class. As for initials, refreshers are on the other side, which, as you can see, that is dropping significantly too. So we're holding more classes with less students. It's not surprising, that's exactly what I'm seeing. Online classes, I got online classes that are full, and then my in-person classes will have a handful of people. People are still nervous about coming into a new online class. In-person class, good. So this is mold. Mold industry is different. Actually, it didn't seem like it was impacted, and I think I would argue the reason why is because the mold, you weren't allowed to do online training from the beginning. Right? What is it, Bob Pro has an online mold course, he had the course before COVID started. So, that was not impacted. So you had people who were already used to taking online courses. Plus, the other thing is, remember on the mold side, the licenses are every 2 years. So in a sense, their extension doesn't impact you. So if I didn't have to take the class, I have 2 years to worry about when I have to take a refresher, and then I've got a 1 year grace on top of that. And then the mold courses. What's interesting about this is that the refreshers are not above the initial courses. The trend line. Catching up. In 2021, it's finally caught up. But there were no mold refresher classes in 2015, 2016 because you didn't, at that point, there was no need for a mold refresher class. Again, your license lasted for 2 years. So in 2017 is when the first refresher classes started. So this is the gap between basically refreshers and initials. In the mold side, we're losing people on our side, and those are significant numbers, but they're still not they're typically like the 10, 15, 20%. Here, they're losing 50% of people not refreshing their license. 56% didn't refresh their license in 2017, 50% didn't refresh their license in 2018. 2019 it was 50%, 2020 was 51%, and then 53% last year. So you have a lot of people who are not refreshing their licenses on the mold side, and I blame that on the Department of Labor. Because on the asbestos side, you get reminders. Every year you get a reminder that basically you have to take a refresher class from the state. In mold, there are no reminders. If the training provider doesn't remind you, nobody else will. Except when you go to look at your license and find out it's expired. On the mold side, this is what we see in the sense of number of people per class. At the beginning, it was, needless to say, there was a whole bunch of people coming in, 13 people per class. 8.2, dropped down to 5, roughly. The next is about a little bit higher than 5, 6, 5.25. And as you can see, there was really no impact for basically 2020, in 2020 for the mold, on the mold side. So, hopefully you enjoyed that presentation as much as I enjoyed speaking it. For inviting me. Every year I get a little older, and every year when I'm invited, I get a little emotional, because that's just the way I'm at. And I thank you. I'm so honored that you feel like I can actually provide anything useful.